Hello, everyone, and welcome to CareersTalk. I'm Suran Sharma, an agile consultant based in Netherlands. And in today's session, we will be covering some challenging situational Scrum Master interview questions shared by our WhatsApp group member. And to help us, we have Stas Pavlov, a professional Scrum trainer, with us. But friends, before we start, make sure to subscribe for more such informative session. And if you find the content valuable, don't forget to hit that like button. So without further ado, let's dive in and let's welcome Stas. So welcome, Stas. Thank you for giving your time today, Stas.
Thank you very much, Sunant. I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Great. And Stas, if you just give a small intro about yourself, that will be great before we jump into.
Will do. Thank you very much. So, Sunant, as you said, my name is Stas Pavlov. I live in the Netherlands like you do. I think we are very close by, both in the Hague area. And I'm a professional Scrum trainer with scrum.org, and I'm also a product leadership consultant with ProAwareness Academy, meaning I spend most of my time talking about product management and agility. That's basically my job. I do this either in trainings or I do this as a consultant with several clients and helping them to improve their product management practices. That's also mostly where my background is. I worked as a product manager and as a product owner myself at large companies, big corporates, but also with startups where the whole company would fit one table. And so that's the boring part. The little bit less boring part is I tend to ride a bicycle every now and then. And I enjoy listening to science fiction books. And why listening? Well, with a family, it's hard for me to find time to actually watch and read a lot of science fiction. So listening still helps me to scratch that itch.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you, Stas. Okay. So if you allow, shall we start?
Yes, let's show.
Okay. So the first question is like, if you have 5 critical features in your backlog, but the team can only work on 2 in the next sprint. So how do you help your team, how to help your product owner to prioritize them, and what criteria do you use? So that's the question, Stas.
Yeah, it's a lovely question, and it's I think a situation which we all recognize, where somehow you have 5 critical features which all need to happen in your next sprint, but 5 critical features, that means they can't all be critical, right? And one of the interesting things about a backlog is that it's ordered, but it's also a list. And this means that while things might have the same priority, if you will, they can only have one order. So the real question is, which one do you put on the top? And whilst there's a whole number of criteria that you can use to determine which one you should do first, to be honest, the one that I use the most it's called my opinion. So the technique that I, in all honesty, use the most for prioritizing my backlogs is whatever I deem appropriate. However, I must emphasize that my opinion should be based on talking to customers, talking to other stakeholders, talking to other team members, or observing what happens in the market. So I need to have argumentation about why I think this is the most important thing. And every product owner and every product manager that's worth their salt should always be armed with the why of their product. Meaning, if you can't explain why you're doing the things that you're doing, why your products exist, what value you're trying to achieve, it's really hard for you to argue why you should do one thing over another thing first. Now, this is a very theoretical answer, but there's a number of things that you can use to make that decision. First and foremost, always talk to your stakeholders, always talk to your team. Why do they think something needs to go first, or maybe not go first? And they might have a bunch of arguments related to either technical feasibility or risk, or something is really valuable, or I don't know, they're launching something else which relies on the thing that we are building. Based on those conversations, you can then make your decision. And if that doesn't provide you with enough information, you can supplement your decision making by using techniques. For example, like a Moscow technique, or you can add some values related to potential value or potential risk to each of those 5 critical features, and then make your decision. Whatever you choose, you can only do as much as your team is able to do within a given time. You can't do all 5, because then you will probably decrease quality. And decreasing quality is a no-go. If you want to do successful product management, you should always release something that has the highest quality standards that you have at that time. In other words, your definition done. If you can't do all 5 and them having deliver them with the highest quality standards that you have, do less, and don't be afraid to disappoint someone. And I hope that answers the question, Sunant.
Yes, thank you, Stas. So if I understood correctly, I think we have to just summarize. So we have to first understand the business value. We should evaluate the business impact of each features. We can consider factors such as customer satisfaction, revenue generation. We have to see the user impact. So we can also assess the impact on the end users, that which features have a directly enhance the user experience, or maybe address some significant pain point. So maybe that may be prioritized higher in that order. So I think, yeah, those are the key takeaways for me. We also talk about dependencies, technical feasibility, like we have to also evaluate the technical complexity and the feasibility of implementing each feature. So maybe our team think that they might not have that skill or expertise, something like that maybe. So yeah, so those are the few, I think, key takeaways for me. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Let's move on. So let's say a key stakeholder requests a significant change to a feature that already into a development. So how do you work with this kind of scenarios, considering the existing priorities and the timeline? Stress.
Yeah, lovely question, and something that I often get. The real question here is this a problem? Because the whole reason why I stepped into the world of agility in the first place is because changes are to be expected. In fact, the most important value within the Agile Manifesto is responding to change over following a plan. That's basically what agility means, right? So if this stakeholder approaches you and wants to have a significant change, perhaps there's a really good reason. Perhaps. Not often, or not always, but it's good to first and foremost understand what is that reason, and does this reason warrant a significant change? If so, by all means, respond to change and adjust your plan. I do feel that a lot of product owners and product managers, especially in larger organizations, are hesitant to change their plans, change their commitments. But this is often related to their commitments being very much output-based rather than outcome-based. And if you commit to delivering, I don't know, let's say it's a pizza restaurant, if you commit to delivering 10 pizzas, you're only done once you've delivered those 10 pizzas. But perhaps the goal here was more important. And if that goal was to have 10 happy customers, hey, maybe you could have already achieved value earlier by delivering them a slice of pizza. You could have done it probably much faster. It's really important for you to understand what's the goal here, and does this change risk that goal? That's why we work with things like a product goal. That's why we work with things like a sprint goal. But stakeholders are allowed to change their mind. And depending on the importance of the stakeholder and dependent on the reason, you should either do it or not do it. Consider the input from your team as well in this scenario, because whilst this stakeholder might be really important, perhaps there is a really a good chance that this significant change will have drastic technical implications, which means it could increase risk or delay timelines. And if so, maybe it's a better idea to first get something out to the market and then incorporate the change after you've delivered value. So again, it's really hard to give a specific answer here because it's a broad scenario, but yeah, you should be welcoming change at all point in time. And again, here, this goes for this question as well. If this happens, and if you can't argue why you're doing the things that you're doing at this point in time, in other words, what's your product vision, what are your current goals, how do they relate to your strategy, and what are you working on right now? And if you can't tell that story, it's really hard to make a proper argument to a stakeholder why you shouldn't incorporate this change at that point in time. Yeah, that's basically the right way to do it, Sunat.
Great. Thank you for that, Stas. Okay, let's move on. This one is again a little bit on a product side because you are already working as a product manager in the past as well. So let's say some market condition suddenly change, and that cause uncertainties about the customer need. So how do you adapt your product roadmap and the strategies to align with this sudden change? Yes.
Yeah, it's again, this is one of these things that you should always be prepared for, especially when you're working with really new products. If you're look at the product lifecycle, and if you're still in the first 2 stages of your product, you're going to be dealing with a lot of sudden market changes because hey, maybe you think your product is the right one for the market that you have, but it turns out that the market, there's a need for your product, but they don't want to buy it from you. This is a branding problem. Change your branding, change your positioning. But and I think this is something that globally we share this experience. Just look back at your plans that you've made early 2020, and how much of those plans were still valid by April. In my case, none. We binned the plan because all of a sudden in March we were all in a lockdown, and this was such a drastic shift in market conditions that whatever we were working on at the time, it was all of a sudden irrelevant. So what we did is basically bin the entire strategy and bin the entire roadmap that we created for that time and start from scratch. Solve the biggest problems there, solve the biggest risks, and then focus on the value that you can deliver. This is a really major shift. This is something that hopefully doesn't happen too often, and I hope not to experience that anytime soon. But often it's much more benign. You release something, and then the market responds to it kind of mildly, meaning some parts of the things that you've released work, others don't. And these are the most risky reactions from the market because it's not entirely clear whether to continue with what you've already planned or to seriously look at what's going on here. And it's always these kind of uncertainties which add up over the long run to you taking the entire completely wrong direction. So talk to your customers, see what's really changed, and try to incorporate some of your assumptions in your next release. And the biggest thing that you can do to solve a situation like this is to release often. As long as you don't release, as long as you don't validate, you learn nothing. So continuously release, continuously learn. I hope that helps, Sunat.
Great. Yeah, absolutely, Stas. Thank you for that. Okay. So let's move on. So this one is, let's say your team is struggling to understand the business value of a user story. So how do you facilitate the communication to ensure that there is a shared understanding among the team members? So that's for you, Stas.
Yeah, I love that question because I love that you incorporated shared understanding, and therefore, because for me, there's a big misconception about refinement, where refinement is basically just focused on slicing items which are in your product backlog so they are ready for the sprint. And whilst that's important, what's much more important is that we create a shared understanding of the work that we need to do. And if you take this approach, all of a sudden, this opens up a lot of opportunities to really do refinement in a different way and actually have a lot of fun with refinement. And facilitation is one of those ways. I feel that we don't talk enough about the importance of facilitation skills for product owners and product managers. There's this conception where we feel that facilitation is a Scrum Master thing. And for sure, Scrum Masters need to be able to facilitate. So do product owners, because let's face it, you're dealing with a lot of stakeholders. You don't want to be dealing with all of those stakeholders individually. So the best way to manage groups of stakeholders is to facilitate. And the same goes for conversations with your team. Being able to facilitate, but also being able to explain again the why of your product. What's your vision? What's your current protocol? What's your current sprint goal? Why is this specific user story important? And if you're using user stories, it's a great format based on actual users. Create personas. Explain a little bit about these personas. Then incorporate your story and your goals alongside with those personas in how you formulate user stories. But then, if your team has a hard time understanding the value of that user story, invite the actual user. Have them explain it, rather than you translating what you've heard from the customer to your team. Bring the two together. Individuals and interactions over processes and tools. A user story is just a tool. Increase interaction between individuals. Being able to facilitate is a great way to do this. That's one of the ways that you can do it, but yeah, try to connect people with the actual problem and again, explain the story of your product. I hope that helps, Sunan.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that, Stas. Okay. So the next one is on conflict. So let's say your two different teams have a conflicting requirement for a specific feature. So how do you resolve the conflict and prioritize the feature? So yeah, this kind of conflict situation come as and when in the real life scenario. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've all been there, right? And the real question here is, how do you do stakeholder management? Are both departments as important? And if so, again, bring those two people together, facilitate. And a great place to do this, by the way, is your review. The power of a sprint review is gravely misunderstood, because let's face it, there's thousands upon thousands of sprint retrospective formats out there, and a lot of them are basically the same format, let's face it. But how many sprint review formats are out there that you know? 10? 5? Perhaps 1? A sprint review is a forward-looking event where we try to figure out what we do next. So we look back on the increment, but that's done. Your increment is done. It's potentially releasable. Now that it's time to move forward, because, hey, let's face it, perhaps market conditions have changed. But also, this is where you invite your key stakeholders at that point in time, and your key stakeholders will shift over time depending on what you're working on. And having stakeholders together in one session after you've showed your previous increment, but also explained the current market conditions, and then ask the stakeholders for their take on current market conditions and their take on current business changes. And then having a conversation about, hey, if we take into consideration what we've learned from our last release and how the market is reacting right now, is our product backlog still relevant? And is the current ordering of our product backlog still the right one? Or should we perhaps change one or two things? And having that conversation during your sprint review is a really powerful way to manage your stakeholders, but also to create agreement about what is important, because it's not just these two departments probably there. Will perhaps also be your manager and perhaps also some other key stakeholders. now you're shifting your conflicts towards a rational discussion, because there's a bunch of stakeholders there. People are uncomfortable with watching a conflict, so they try to resolve it. And again, this ties back into the previous question, being able to facilitate, learn a couple of liberating structures, try to understand design thinking principles, the divergence, convergence, or try a 1-2 for all, that's a liberating structure, really will help you to facilitate that discussion about what is it that we should be working on next. And don't try to resolve each conflict. It's not your job. Your job is to maximize value, not to create consensus, because if you try to create consensus, the only thing that you will know for sure is that there's nobody will be really happy. Make a choice, incorporate the discussions with your stakeholders in that choice, and sometimes you're going to be disappointing people. Deal with it. I hope that helps.
Absolutely. Thanks, Stas, for that. Okay, let's move on. So now the scenario is that your user or the stakeholders provide negative feedback about a recently released features. So how do you respond and address the concern while minimizing the disruption with your team? Your team is right now demotivated, and yeah. So what you are going to do about it, Stas?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I'm wondering what happened in this scenario, because to me, if I read, if I hear the question, there's negative feedback after our previous release, and how do we?
Maybe the outcome is
my
not that
priority
great. Maybe the outcome is not
my priority
expected.
shouldn't be to. Yeah, no, I agree. My priority shouldn't be to minimize the disruption to the backlog and to the roadmap. I welcome disruption to the roadmap. If there's negative feedback from the market, we need to deal with this urgently. And this could mean what we've planned all of a sudden isn't relevant anymore. And depending on the level of negativity, this could mean we need to take a completely different direction. And if we keep holding on to the plans that we've created, are we really trying to be agile, or are we just trying to deliver output so we can satisfy a milestone? This is not maximizing value. Maximizing value is dealing with that negative feedback, incorporating it, and finding how to resolve the situation as quick as you can. And yeah, your roadmap might suffer. That's collateral damage, but that's to be expected. Just look at most major tech companies right now and look at their humble beginnings. Most of them were doing something completely else than they were doing right now. And that's because they found that certain parts in their idea, in their roadmap, worked and others didn't. And this caused a significant change in their approach, meaning they are now a different company that they initially set out to be. That's what agility is actually about, responding to the change, over following the plan. You need to have a plan. Responding to change is more important. So don't try to minimize disruptions to your roadmap. Welcome them. But yeah, this means you sometimes also need to do a bit more stakeholder management, because stakeholders like to get one question answered most of the time, and that's when will the stuff that I want be done. Yeah, there could be a situation where the stuff that they want will never be done because the reaction from the market was negative, wasn't great. So we've gone into another direction. Again, don't be afraid to disappoint people. It's about maximizing value, not satisfying stakeholders. I hope that helps. It's a tough situation, but yeah. Welcome change.
Great. Thank you for that, Stas. Okay. So the next one is, let's say the team propose a feature without direct user feedback. They just push something to the production. So how do you make sure that the team should have alignment with the user need? Maybe it's a kind of gold plating kind of situation where a team think that they are overpowered and they are just taken few decisions without considering the user in that loop.
Yeah, again, It's a lovely question, and I'm not sure if this is a problem. Obviously, always consider your user, but don't try to. It's okay to have an idea and be really convinced about your idea being great and just going for it. However, minimize risk by running an experiment instead of just releasing it to production, depending on how big the change is. Perhaps you can run an experiment, create a digital prototype, go up to a customer, show it to them, and get a reaction. If you do this a lot, you can do this quite quickly. That could help you to determine should you even build this into a proper feature and release it or not. And will also have the added benefit of you having some arguments to other stakeholders which might question your choices if that's needed. But hey, sometimes you might have to have a great idea and maybe you don't have the time or you don't need to take the time to first always talk to a customer. And let's face it, if you always, whenever you talk to your customer, ask them what they want, you're never going to deliver them what they need. So yeah, sometimes you need to make those assumptions, even though your customer doesn't tell you they actually need this. Apple is really great at this. They're really great at identifying needs that customers don't actually know they have, yeah, can turn into a fairly profitable business, to say the least. Again, I would welcome this type of behavior from my team because it's very mature. And one of the ways that I've incorporated this is by, again, going back to refinement, shifting that refinement mindset to creating a shared understanding will also help you to incorporate experimentation in your refinement sessions and actually involving users. One of the things that we used to do is actually go to potential customers outside of our office, whilst also getting lunch for the rest of the team. And we would go to a specific place where we knew that our customers would be, show them our digital prototype, get their reactions on it, and then go back to the office with user insights and lunch. Now, that's a great way to do refinement, isn't it? I hope that helps.
Great ideas, Stas, over there. Okay, so let's move on. So after a new feature is released, how do you measure its success, and what are the few KPIs which you want to share?
Yeah, so it's a tricky situation because it's also always important to consider what is it that you should be measuring. And the question on the answer to the question is actually hidden in the question: what is it that you're trying to achieve? What are your goals? So going back to your vision and your strategy and goals, they're not just important for argument's sake because it's in a book. When we look at the concept of strategy, what we really are talking about here are what are the assumptions that we are making that need to be true in order for us to be successful with this endeavor. And these could be assumptions about a specific market niche or whatever product fits might be needed to appeal to that niche. And if we want to have a proper fit and appeal to a certain niche, this probably means we need to make certain trade-offs, in other words, to make choices. Now, all of these things are assumptions. And in order to test those assumptions, you come up with hypotheses, and we translate those hypotheses in stuff that's on your product backlog. For example, if you look at a user story, it describes a certain user, which is probably part of a certain niche, who needs something. These are all assumptions. Now, in order to then see, did we deliver this value, you will also need to consider, how do we know that what we've delivered here is successful? In other words, what measurements should we attach to this? And these will be different measures or KPIs depending on what it is that you're working on. The other thing that you need to consider as well is that you shouldn't only look at your customer, your user KPIs, but also at your KPIs related to your business model. depending on the type of product that you are, depending on the type of business that you are, there's different drivers of value, such as monetary value, but also cost savings. Perhaps there's a market share that you want to have before actually turning a profit. This is what a lot of tech companies with a lot of venture capital backing do. Market share first, profit later. This is a perfectly valid approach, but this will also determine your main metrics. If making a profit isn't your key focus, that's not something that you should be measuring right now. Perhaps you should be focused on getting more market share. Going back to the question here, really look at your strategy and your current goals to determine what it is you should be measuring. But a bunch of things that you probably be looking at are customer satisfaction. Or another one that you should also be considering is your cycle time. How long did it take you to get stuff to the market? If you can get stuff to the markets often and early, that usually means you're learning often and early, which helps you to reduce risk. But yeah, customer satisfaction. Another one which I really like is feature usage. How much of your features are actually being used? Let's face it, how many features do you think your PowerPoint or Excel on your computer actually has, and how much of those features do you actually use?
Hardly 10
For
20%.
most people, in best case scenario, yeah. Very few people use the other 80%. Maybe it's a perfectly valid approach for you to then cut those features. If people don't use those features a lot, take them out. Depending on the type of customer, if these are really high profile customers which use your products a lot, maybe they are willing to pay much more for your product than your regular customers, and now you've created a new business opportunity for yourself. I hate to give this answer with a lot of words, but yeah, the answer again here is it will depend, and this is a consultancy answer, but yeah, it will really depend on your current business goals and the things that you're trying to achieve. That's what should be driving your measures. Hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you, Stas, for that. Absolutely. Okay, so this one is the last one, and again a tricky one. So let's say your team, or let's say one of your team member comes to you, and that one of the team member is not performing that well, and there are a lot of complaints which are coming from the team members that this particular specific team member don't have that skill set to work in our team. So how do you tackle this kind of situation as a Scrum Master if it's a performance related issue?
It's a great one. It's a tough one. Also for product owners, I would say, first and foremost, have a conversation. What's going on here? There could be any number of things that's going on. I know great people who are not performing as great because, hey, they just got a kid, they just moved to a new house. So they're dealing with a lot of stress at home, and that impacts their work. Putting more pressure on is the best way to get somebody to a quick burnout. That's not great for a person. That's not, and that's also bad for business. So have a conversation first and figure out what is it that is bothering that person. Try to then help them to recover, or to also have a conversation with the team about how can the entire team, support the specific team member in what they are facing right now by perhaps taking over some of their tasks, or maybe transferring some knowledge if it's a specialist to other team members. If it's a business analyst, for example, a lot of the skills that a business analyst has are also relevant for product owners, but they're also relevant for UX professionals. But they could also be relevant for people who do programming. Perhaps some of the skills could also be transferred to somebody that's more focused on testing. We all are good at something, and we can probably take over certain work from one individual. But if we're going to be doing it effectively, that's a whole different conversation. But yeah, talk to the team, talk to the individual, figure out if you can help them. If this doesn't help, you might be in a different situation, and this might be an opportunity for you to flag this as an impediment if you're a Scrum Master. And this means you probably need to start talking to managers to see if you can figure this out. That should be your last resort, because now you're flagging an individual team member as an impediment. This is a thing you shouldn't take too lightly. Often having a bit of patience and involving the entire team will help. As a product owner, if this happens, also look at your own behavior. Do you have a product vision? Do you have a product goal? Are you able to explain the why of your product again, going back to that old phrase? The why that's important in this case as well is if it's clear to someone why it's significant what they're doing on, and it actually is relevant and makes an impact. That does a lot for work satisfaction and work happiness. That's something that you should always be doing, but perhaps maybe you could be doing a bit better in this situation. But maybe you are not relying as much as you can on the principle of pull that a team should have. Like, we pull in work into the sprint, meaning it's not the product owner who pushes work into the sprint. No, the team pulls work into the sprint based on their capacity. And if you want to understand your capacity, please don't use velocity. It's bad. Use throughput instead, for example. But yeah, if you're doing too much pushing as a product owner, yeah, you might be putting unnecessary pressure on a team, resulting in unhealthy behavior in the team. So those are things that you can do as a Scrum Master and as a product owner, but this could be an impediment. But before it becomes an impediment, there's a lot of steps that you can take. And again, don't forget the 5 Scrum values. Hope that helps.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Stas. Okay, I think, yeah, we have covered a lot of questions today. I think we are good for today's test. Thank you. And
You're welcome.
thank you, friends, for joining us today's session. And we hope you found this session helpful and informative. And if you enjoyed this session, please don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. We hope to see you in our next session. Bye. And thank you, Stas, one more time. Thank you, Stas.
Thank you very much, Sunant. Cheers.